We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Tesam at Aleph and Meseches 49a. The Gemara is in the middle of explaining the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael again says that on a Doraisa level, we evaluate the best property based on the best property of the Nizuk, and the Gemara explains what that means. Hachab Mayaskin, and here what are we dealing with? Kagon Shaisa Idyas de Nizuk Kiziboris de Mazik, and this was already mentioned earlier on the previous summit. The case over here is the best property of the Nizuk is the equivalent of the worst property of the Mazik, and that's the machlokus between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. What does it mean that by cases of Nizikin, by cases of damage, you pay from the best? Rabbi Yishmael savar b'denizik shaimin, and Rabbi Yishmael holds that you go according to the best property of the nizik. So in this case, the mazik doesn't actually have to give from his best property; he can give from his worst property, because that's the same as the best property of the nizik. For Rabbi Akiva savar, and Rabbi Akiva holds b'demazik shaimin, that on a doraisa level, the mazik has to give the best from his own property. Rashi explains, meaning according to Rabbi Yishmael also, in terms of the monetary value of the damage you're paying, you go according to how much damage there was. Now, after you get a valuation from Bezdin, and then he says, I have no money to pay, so Yitol Karka b'dmei mos niskos, and then he wants to collect land instead of the money. Now he wants to, the mazik wants to just pay from his worst property, which is the equivalent of the best property of the nizik. The other person says, no, I want to get from your actual best property, according to the value of the damage, because that's what the pasuk says. It says the best of the property, and again, that's the machlokus Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael savar b'denizik shamin and umeitav sham ratorish and bo lagvoso karka goru mediusu shal nizik v'yeshlo lagvoso aruga b'meitav shal nizik al karcho yigbem meitav. Again, according to Rabbi Yishmael, in this case, that's what you're allowed to do. You're allowed to say b'denizik shamin, I'm only giving you from the best of your property, meaning the person who was damaged from his property. It doesn't have to be the best of the mazik's property. Avol tova mediusu shal nizik ein lanu lochaf es hamazik lefroa v'afilu yeshlo. But if he has better property than the nizik, meaning if the mazik's best property is better than the nizik, we can't force the mazik to pay that even if he has it. No, we say again, according to Rabbi Yishmael, it's from the best property of the nizik. And Rabbi Akiva disagrees and says, "But the mazik shamin and of sadosa, meaning from the best of his fields, amrator shigvenu. That's what he has to pay him with. Again, the best of the mazik's fields, according to Rabbi Akiva." And the Gemara continues, my time with Rabbi Yishmael. What's the reason of Rabbi Yishmael? From where does Rabbi Yishmael learn that we go by the best field of the nizik? Nemra sada lamata v'nemra sada lamalo. It says sada below, and it says the word sada above. Masada ha'amur lamala. Just like when it uses the word sada above the nizik, it's referring to the field of the nizik. Afsada ha'amur lamata. So too when it uses the word sada below, meaning when it uses the word sada in terms of what he's paying from the nizik, it's really the best field of the nizik. Rabbi Akiva holds, no, meitav sadeu yishalim, de'ech dekam yishalim. When it says meitav sadeu yishalim, it means the field of the person who's paying. The best of his field he pays, meaning the best of his own field he pays. That's why Rabbi Akiva says it has to be the best of the fields of the mazik. Rashi says, Nemra sada lamala le'inyan nezik, meaning by the actual damage that occurs. The pasuk says, ubir b'steyacher. It says that the person's animal went into another person's field. There it's clearly talking about the field of the nizik, and so therefore we assume over here also, according to Rabbi Yishmael, it's talking about the field of the nizik. And Rabbi Akiva responds, no, that's not the case. Meitav sadeu shalim, it means the best of the field of the individual who actually is paying. Rashi continues here, Rabbi Akiva, sadeu yishalim ksib b'mishalim akas medaber. Hainu mazik, we're talking about the mazik over there, the person who's paying, and so therefore it's the best of his field. Rabbi Akiva, and what Rabbi Akiva is saying to Rabbi Yishmael is as follows: Lo ba'akasav lahakil ala mazik. The pasuk over here is not being lenient on the mazik and saying you can give the worst of your field if it's the equivalent of the best of the nizik's field. Li pater b'ziboris shaloim himhike idyas shal nizik, that he can get off. That he doesn't have to pay as much, meaning to say he can pay with his ziboris, with his worst field, if it's the equivalent of the idis of the nizik. It means that when you collect for damages, it has to be from the best property of the mazik. That's what Rabbi Akiva's opinion is. And the Gemara continues with Rabbi Yishmael. Now Rabbi Yishmael responds, Ahani gzeir shava v'ahani kra. The gzeir shava, we use the gzeir shava and we use the pasuk as well. Ahani Gezer Shava Lechadamar. We use the Gezer Shava for what we said, meaning the Gezer Shava says that the best, when we say the best of the field, we mean the best of the fields of the Nizuk. Ahani Kra, now what is the pasuk referring to? The Islay Lamazik Idyas Viziboris. That goes in the following case. Let's say the Mazik has good property and bad property. Viziboris Didei Lo Shav Yakidis Nizik, but his worst property is not the equivalent of the best property of the Nizik. So there you follow the understanding of the pasuk of Rabbi Akiva. The Meshalim Leimi Meitav, then he pays from his best property in that situation. Meaning Rabbi Shmuel says there is a situation where the Mazik has to pay from the best of his own property. That's if his worst property is not the equivalent of the best property of the Nizik. And then the Gemara, and then Rabbi Akiva said, Rabbi Akiva Omer Lo Ba Hakasav Elo Ligvos Lenizakim Min Ha'edyus. Again, Rabbi Akiva says the pasuk is not coming to say any leniency. Rather, he has to pay from his best property, meaning the Mazik's best property. The Kal V'chomer LeHekdesh. Then Rabbi Akiva said this line that is certainly true when it comes to Hekdesh. And the Gemara says, "My Kal V'chomer LeHekdesh." What does it mean, Kal V'chomer LeHekdesh? And Rashi over here says, "The Kal V'chomer LeHekdesh v'Kasalka Daitach B'Nizakin Nami Koi." Right now, we think this phrase, the Kal V'chomer LeHekdesh, it's also talking about a situation of damage. And we will take a look at the previous Rashis as well. V'Ahani Kro, Rabbi Yishmael says that the pasuk is also used to Sodeo Yishalim de Mashma de Mazik Shaimin, meaning the best of the Mazik's property. Sometimes we do pay in that. And the Gemara said that would be in the following case: V'Ziboris Didei Lo Shav Yakidis de Nizik. Let's say the Ziboris of the Mazik is not the equivalent of the best of the Nizik. Ahani Kro L'Shalum Me'edyus Didei. So then the Mazik does have to pay from his best property. And Rashi explains why that's a chiddush. The lav kra, because if not for the pasuk, hava mina lo chayve rachmana tfei mimeit of the nizik. Maybe I would think that the Torah never makes you pay more than the best quality land of the nizik. V'lo rami dine de nizik idyus the mazik, and the mazik doesn't have to pay his best property in that case. V'lishkol mai the mashkach gabe ki ilo lo have idyus. The mazik can essentially pretend like he doesn't have idyus, and then he could say, "I'm going to give my ziboris because I never have to pay you more than the equivalent of the idyus of the nizik." And the Gemara continues, and again the Gemara had asked, what does it mean, my Kal V'chomer LeHekdesh? What does Rabbi Akiva mean when he says a Kal V'chomer for Hekdesh? And so the Gemara suggests, if you're going to say, Rabbi Akiva is talking about a case where our ox gores an ox of Hekdesh, meaning to say when a regular person's ox damages an ox that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, but in that case you don't have to pay at all. When it talks about damages to an ox, it talks about shor reyehu, the ox of his friend. That's what the Torah says, and not a shor of hekdesh. And so no damage is paid whatsoever. So it doesn't make sense that Rabbi Akiva would say kal v'chomer for hekdesh that you're going to collect from Edius. You don't collect it all in that case. Rather, what Rabbi Akiva is referring to is a person says, I'm obligating upon myself to pay a money to bedek habayis. And Rabbi Akiva is saying a kal v'chomer that the treasure of the Beis HaMikdash can come and he can collect from the best of the property in that case. But that's not true either. Lo yehei ala balchov. In that case, hekdesh is no better than a balchov. It's just like a creditor. Or balchov, do you know bebeinanis? And the halach is that a creditor collects from the average property, not from the best property. Now, if you're going to suggest that Rabbi Akiva holds that by a creditor also he collects from the best property, just like by cases of damages, but still the Kal V'chomer won't work. We can refute the Kal V'chomer. Mala Bal Chov, because what's unique about a Bal Chov, Shekain Yofeh Kocho b'Nizakin, that when you're talking about a Bal Chov in a case not of Hekdesh, so by Nizakin he has a great strength in that case, he's able to collect from Idyus, so maybe that's why the Bal Chov can collect from Idyus when you're not talking about Hekdesh. But Tomer beHekdesh, but whereas by Hekdesh, Shekain Hora Kocho b'Nizakin, so Hekdesh by Nizakin has less power. As we just said before, Hekdesh doesn't collect. When our ox scores an ox of Hekdesh, there is no payment of damages. And so therefore the Kal V'chomer doesn't work, even if you're going to say that Rabbi Akiva holds in general a creditor collects from the best property just like Nizakin. And so the Gemara says, Liolam denagche Torah didon l'Torah de hekdesh. Really, Rabbi Akiva is talking about a situation, he is talking about that case, where our ox gores an ox of hekdesh. For Rabbi Akiva savar like Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, and Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, that in that case there is a payment to hekdesh. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says, Shor shel hekdesh shenagach l'shor shel hedyot. If a shor of hekdesh gores a shor that belongs to a regular potter, in that case there's no obligation to pay. However, the other other way around, if a shore of a regular person gores the shore that belongs to hekdesh, bein tam uvein muad, whether that shore is a tam or a muad, meshalim nezek shalim, he pays full damages in that case, meaning we're actually stricter. When the shore of a regular person gores the shore of hekdesh, we're actually stricter. We don't say there's a half payment by a tam, rather we say you always pay full payment, even if it's an ox that is a tam that is not accustomed to goring. But the Gemara continues, if so, if that's what Rabbi Akiva is saying, and he holds like Rav Shimon ben Manasseh, in general, if you gore an ox of hekdesh, Rabbi Akiva is more strict like Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. So who says that they're arguing in general about what we said before? Who says they're arguing about a case where the idius of the nizik is equivalent of the ziborius of the mazik, and Rabbi Akiva is being more strict than Rabbi Shmuel, and he's saying you can't pay the ziborius of the mazik in that case, it has to be the idius of the mazik in that case. Who says that's the machlokas? Dilma dekuli alma b'din nizik shaymin. And maybe everybody agrees we go by the property of the nizik, meaning to say that we're lenient in a situation where the idius of the nizik is the equivalent of the ziborius of the mazik. Even Rabbi Akiva agrees to that. Maybe the whole machlokas between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva is the same machlokas between Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh and the Rabbanan, meaning the machlokas is just in general, if a person's ox gores an ox of hekdesh, does the person have to pay or not? Rabbi Akiva savar like Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh that yes, the hedyot has to pay in that situation. Rabbi Shmuel savar like Rabbanan. Rabbi Shmuel holds like the Rabbanan that there's no payment in that case. Maybe that's the entire machlokas, just a machlokas about goring a shore of hekdesh. And to that the Gemara says, no, imkain, if so, my lo bo hakasa. First of all, what is the phrase of Rabbi Akiva that the pasuk is only coming for? That sounds like we're discussing something relevant to what Rabbi Yishmael said in terms of collections by damages. V'yod, and furthermore, my kal v'chomer lahekdesh. What's the phrase that he says it's a kal v'chomer by hekdesh? It wouldn't make sense to use the phrase kal v'chomer if that's what Rabbi Akiva was saying. V'yod, and further, Amar Ravashi, didn't Ravashi say? And Rashi explains, Meshalim nezek shalim, again, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, when a person's damages an ox of hekdesh, it's actually stricter, and he always pays full damage even by a tam. V'dorish reyehu hachi. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, he darshans the word reyehu as follows. Reyehu hu de meshalim chatzi nezek. By reyehu, the payment is half damage. Aval hekdesh, but if a person damages the shore of hekdesh, nezek shalim, then he always pays nezek shalim. Ulagabe hezek hekdesh dorish hachi. And then in terms of, let's say, hekdesh's ox does the damage, you darshan the other way around. L'reyehu hu d'mechayev, by a reyehu there's a chiyuv. Aval hekdesh shehizika, but if hekdesh does the damage, potter, then hekdesh is potter. Hekdesh does not have to pay. And then the Gemara said, imkain, if so, meaning to say, if Rabbi Akiva was only arguing about hekdesh, the lo poligoleh de reisha, my lo bo akasav, if he's not arguing on Rabbi Yishmael's actual case, again, Rabbi Yishmael's leniency that you can pay with the ziborius of the mazik if it's the equivalent of the edges of the nizik, so then what's the phrase lo bo akasav de kamer? What does Rabbi Akiva mean when he says lo bo akasav, the mashma lo bo lakach el lakach? It sounds like he's saying the pasuk does not mean what you said, but rather it means as follows, v'yodi Rabbi Akiva kula kamar lagabe mazik Rabbi Shmuel. And further, if Rabbi Akiva is lenient by the mazik like Rabbi Shmuel, he agrees with Rabbi Shmuel that the mazik can pay from his worst property if it's the equivalent of the best property of the nizik. So my kal v'chomer lahekdesh, what's the phrase kal v'chomer? To kamar hol v'kuli, because if Rabbi Akiva is agreeing to the leniency of Rabbi Shmuel, hechi matzi l'meimar v'kal v'chomer, the mekilina nami gabe hekdesh. You wouldn't say a kal v'chomer that we're for sure lenient by hekdesh. That wouldn't make any sense in the context of what we are discussing, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Tes Amud Beis.